I've buried friends, family, and more versions of myself than I care to count. Death doesn't scare me the way it used to. It just lingers. It sits in the corner of the room like an old friend you don't talk to anymore but can't quite forget. Every once in a while, it leans forward, smiles, and reminds you it's still there waiting its turn. Most people don't talk about death. They change the subject, make a joke, look at their phones. But when the night gets quiet, when the laughter fades and the screens go dark, everyone hears it, that small, hollow sound in the chest that whispers, "What happens when this all ends?" I've been hearing that whisper more often lately. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's the way the world feels like it's spinning faster but getting emptier. Every day there's another headline, another tragedy, another name trending for a few hours before it disappears into the noise. We pretend we're alive, but half the time we're just scrolling through other people's lives. One night, not long ago, I couldn't sleep. The rain was tapping the window, soft but steady like time, reminding me it's still moving, whether I'm ready or not. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, and for the first time in a long time I said it out loud. Lord, what really happens when we die? I didn't expect an answer. Heaven doesn't usually take late-night calls. But the question stayed in the room, hanging there between the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator too heavy to take back. I thought about the people I'd lost. Their voices, their laughter, how they faded, not all at once, but piece by piece like a photograph left in the Sunday. We like to imagine that death is an event, something that happens after. But what if it starts while we're still here? When we stop loving, when we stop forgiving, when we stop noticing how beautiful an ordinary morning can be. I looked at the reflection in the window, an old man with tired eyes staring back, and for a moment I didn't recognize him. He looked unfinished. That's when the power flickered. Just once. The light dimmed, came back, and in that heartbeat of darkness, the air in the room changed. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm, it was aware, and in that silence, that sacred, terrifying silence, I heard a voice, not outside me, but somewhere deep within, like it had been waiting all this time to speak. You ask what happens when you die, the voice said, calm as the rain. But tell me first, have you ever really lived? When he asked that question, have you ever really lived? I froze. I thought I knew the answer. I've had a career, a family, success, regrets, laughter, pain, all the pieces people point to when they say a man has lived a full life. But sitting there in that room, with his voice still echoing in the silence, all I could feel was the hollow space between the moments I'd taken for granted. The rain outside grew heavier, hitting the glass like 1,000 clocks ticking down. I whispered, almost afraid to hear it myself, I don't know. That's when everything I'd ever done started to replay, not as memories but as truths. I saw myself on movie sets, surrounded by people, applause filling the air. And yet, beneath the lights, there was always this quiet ache, the kind that fame can't reach. I saw the times I'd walk past someone in need, too proud or too busy to care, the words I never said, the apologies I never made. He didn't say anything, he just let me watch. And the more I saw, the more I realized how many days I'd lived without being alive. I'd mistaken movement for meaning. I'd been so focused on being remembered that I'd forgotten to actually be present. The voice came again, softer this time, almost like a sigh. Most people fear death, he said, because they've never learned how to live. They cling to days instead of moments, to noise instead of connection. They survive time, but they never taste eternity. I wanted to speak to defend myself, to say I'd tried, that I'd done my best, but the words died before they reached my lips. Because deep down I knew he was right. I had chased everything except peace. I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of guilt and something deeper, grief, maybe, for the man I could have been. The kind who stopped to listen, who said, I love you, before it was too late, who believed that kindness was more powerful than fear. Outside, lightning flashed just once, enough to paint the room in white, and in that light for a split second I thought I saw him. not as a figure this time, but as a reflection in the window, where my own face had been moments before. The eyes looking back weren't condemning, they were patient, sad but patient. Then came his voice again, steady, close, almost inside my heartbeat. Death isn't what takes you, he said. Forgetfulness is. Every time you turn away from love, a piece of your soul goes quiet. That's what dying really is, the slow unlearning of how to feel. I sat there, unable to breathe, staring into the storm outside. The streetlights flickered like candles running out of wax. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of continuing to live like I already had. The storm outside quieted, but inside me, everything was trembling. It was as if the question itself, have you ever really lived, had cracked something open, and through that crack, light began to pour in. I blinked once, twice, and the room around me seemed to fold away like paper in the wind. I wasn't in my house anymore. I was standing in a field that stretched farther than sight, endless, silver, soft with mist. The air was still, heavy with the kind of silence that doesn't scare you, only makes you listen. Above me, the sky shimmered between night and morning as if heaven hadn't decided what time it wanted to be. Then I felt him before I saw him, that same presence, steady, warm, unexplainable. When he appeared, there was no flash, no trumpet, no wings, just a man, a light behind his eyes like sunrise trapped in human form. He stood close enough for me to hear him breathe. "Clint," he said, "you asked what happens when you die." I nodded, though my voice was gone. He looked past me toward the horizon. "Let me show you." The air shimmered. The ground beneath us began to move, not shake, but remember. Suddenly the field around me filled with people, some faces I recognized, some I didn't. They weren't walking or speaking, just being. Light moved through them like wind, connecting one to another, invisible threads weaving in silence. "What is this?" I asked. "This," he said, "is what remains." I watched. A young woman smiled, and that smile rippled through the others like a wave of light. Somewhere, a man placed his hand on another's shoulder, and that simple touch glowed like gold. I saw sorrow too, a tear falling, landing in the grass, and the earth itself drank it, turning it into light. Then I understood they weren't living or dead. They were remembered. Each act of love they'd ever given was still here, alive, pulsing through eternity like echoes that never stop. Jesus turned to me again. "When a soul leaves the body," he said, "it doesn't disappear. It returns to every place it ever loved, to every life it ever touched. Love is the language of eternity, and it never forgets its words." I could barely speak. "So death, it's not an ending?" He smiled. "Death is not a wall, Clint. It's a door. The ones who loved well simply walk through it. The ones who refuse to love, they stand on the threshold, afraid to let go of themselves." His words sank deep. I thought of all the times I'd held grudges, all the people I'd shut out because it was easier than forgiving. For a moment I couldn't look at him. He stepped closer, his voice almost breaking with gentleness. "Heaven isn't up there," he said, touching his hand to his heart. "It's what happens when love keeps going." Then he looked out across the field again. "And hell," he said quietly, "is what happens when it stops." A wind rose suddenly, rushing across the grass, and every soul shimmered brighter for one last breath before dissolving into the horizon light, returning to light. And when the wind settled, I was alone again, my knees weak, my chest heavy with awe and something like heartbreak. The light in the field began to fade, but his presence didn't. It stayed, steady and quiet, like the rhythm of a heartbeat beneath the stillness of the world. I stood there, unable to speak, waiting for him to say something more, anything that could help me make sense of what I'd just seen. He looked at me, and in his gaze I felt the weight of eternity and the gentleness of mercy all at once. "You've always asked what happens after death," he said. "But the better question is, what happens to love when a body stops breathing?" He took a step closer, and the air shimmered around his words. Love doesn't vanish. It becomes motion invisible but eternal. Every act of kindness, every forgiveness, every sacrifice, they echo through creation. They ripple through the hearts of those still living until they find their way home again. He knelt, ran his hand through the grass, and where his fingers touched, light bloomed small golden sparks like fireflies. These, he said, are the moments that survive you. This is the afterlife most people forget, the one they're building right now. I swallowed hard. But what about those who hurt others, who live selfishly? Where do they go? He looked up, his eyes deep and sad, but never condemning. They go where they always were inside themselves. That is their eternity. A soul that refuses love is like a room with the door locked from the inside. No one traps them there but their own fear. Hell isn't punishment, Clint. It's the absence of love freely chosen. He stood, and the fireflies of light began to drift upward, vanishing into the air. People think I came to promise heaven, he continued, but I came to remind them that heaven begins wherever love is allowed to live. Every time someone forgives, comforts, or lifts another, the kingdom returns to earth, even for a moment. His voice softened. Do you see why I asked if you've ever truly lived? I nodded, unable to hold his gaze. My throat burned with shame and awe. Then live, he said. Why, you still have breath. Tell the ones you love that you love them. Give grace to those who don't deserve it, because that's what makes it grace. And when you feel small, remember, you are not measured by what you've built, but by what you've healed. The words fell over me like warm rain. He stepped closer, his hand resting on my shoulder. Nothing that is loved ever truly dies, he whispered. The body may rest, but love keeps walking. Through memory, through mercy, through every act of kindness that bears your fingerprints. I felt my chest tremble, tears running freely now. Then death isn't the end, I said. He smiled a smile I'll never forget. No, Clint, death is love changing clothes. And with that, the wind carried his light upward, scattering it into the dawn that was just beginning to break. When I opened my eyes, the world was quiet again. The storm was gone, but its scent still lingered, the smell of rain on old earth, clean and raw, like the air after something sacred has passed through. I was sitting in the same chair, the lamp still burning low, the same cup of coffee gone cold beside me. Nothing had changed, but somehow everything had. For a long while I just sat there breathing, letting the silence fill the room. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything I'd just seen, full of the echo of his voice. Every act of love delays the end. Every act of love survives you. I repeated those words under my breath, slowly, as if saying them would carve them deeper into my bones. I felt a strange kind of peace, the kind that doesn't erase guilt but transforms it into hunger to live differently. Morning light began to slip through the blinds, cutting lines across the floor like golden rivers. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the neighborhood wake up. A man hurried to his car, coffee in hand. A woman walked her dog, head down, eyes on her phone. The same world I'd always seen, and yet, for the first time, I saw the souls behind the routines. I saw people trying, surviving, aching to be understood. Something in me shifted. For years, I'd carried a list of names, people I'd wronged, people I'd lost, people I'd loved badly. I'd kept them buried under excuses, telling myself time would take care of it, but time doesn't heal, it only hides. So I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking as I dialed the first number. It had been 20 years. When the voice answered older, softer, I didn't try to explain. I just said, I'm sorry. And somehow that was enough. We cried, not for what was gone, but for what was still alive between us. I made more calls that day. Some answered, some didn't, but each one was a step back toward the world I'd forgotten to love. Each apology felt like a resurrection, small but real. By afternoon I went for a walk. The air was warm, the ground still damp beneath my boots. Every sound, birds, footsteps, laughter in the distance felt like a hymn I hadn't heard in years. The simple things were holy again. I realized then that death wasn't something waiting for me at the end of the road. It was something I'd carried with me in every moment I refused to love, every time I chose pride over peace. And life, real life, was simply learning to lay that burden down. When I got back home, I sat on the porch, the same place I'd asked him that question. The cup was empty now, but I held it anyway, like a reminder. I looked up at the sky, bright, endless, impossibly kind, and whispered, "I understand now." For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of wasting what little time I had left to love. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but it wasn't the same kind of restlessness. It wasn't fear or guilt this time. It was gratitude. The kind that hums beneath your ribs like a quiet song you didn't know you still remembered. I went outside. The air was cool, still damp from the afternoon rain. The moon hung low, heavy and silver, casting a path of light across the wet pavement. The world was silent, not dead, not empty, just listening. I sat on the porch steps, coffee cup in hand. Though I didn't fill it, I wasn't drinking it anymore. I was holding it like a relic, a reminder of the night everything changed. I thought about him, about the way he looked at me, not as a man condemned, but as one rediscovered. And I remembered what he said, "Nothing that is loved ever truly dies." I let those words roll through me again, slow and sure, until I could feel them settle deep inside. For the first time, they didn't sound like a mystery. They sounded like truth. The wind picked up a little, stirring the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang faint, almost shy, like the earth itself saying amen. I looked out across the street, the same houses, the same lives, moving quietly inside them. Somewhere, someone was laughing. Somewhere else, someone was crying. Both were prayers. I realized different languages, same meaning. That's when it hit me. The question I'd been chasing my whole life, what happens when we die, had never been about death. It had always been about life. Because every time we choose love, every time we forgive, every time we give more than we keep, we leave a piece of ourselves behind that never stops breathing. I used to think legacy was about fame or work or words carved into stone, but legacy is smaller than that, softer. It's the warmth someone feels when they think of you. It's the light that stays in their eyes when they speak your name. That's eternity, not gold streets or shining crowns, but the simple persistence of love. I thought about the people I'd lost, faces I still carried. And for the first time, I didn't feel like they were gone. I felt them around me. In the wind, in the quiet, in the way my heart didn't feel as heavy anymore. Maybe that's all heaven really is, the moment you realize love never left. A long breath escaped me. "I'm not afraid anymore," I whispered into the dark. Not of death, not of endings. The moonlight stretched across the porch, silver and calm, like a hand resting gently on my shoulder. And I swear just for a moment I could almost hear him again, the same voice that woke me that night. "Now you understand," he said. "The question was never about dying, it was about living." I smiled, eyes still closed, and whispered back, "I know." A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of rain and the sound of the world breathing. Somewhere, a light flickered on, maybe a porch, maybe a window, a small, ordinary thing, but it was enough. Because the truth is, none of us ever really die. We just keep passing the light forward, one soul at a time. And as I sat there in that quiet night, feeling more alive than ever, I said the only words that mattered, words I'd carry into whatever comes next. Love never ends, and light is still stronger than darkness.